Hi everyone, David Scott here with your latest video about all things singing. As I'm recording from Dublin in Ireland in mid-February, we are in lockdown number 3, another extended period of restrictions. And what does that mean? Well, firstly, hairdressers and barbers are still closed, so as you might notice, I've taken matters into my own hand and shaved my head. How bad is it? Well, I suppose it'll grow back. But look, that's not why we're here. We're here about singing, and I know a lot of viewers of this channel really enjoy meeting up with their friends or with their local choir and singing together. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen anytime soon. I was reading there that with the Tokyo Olympics, they want to go ahead with it this year, but they've put as one of the rules at the venues, no singing. So unfortunately, groups of people meeting together and singing is just not going to happen, probably until we're all vaccinated later on this year. So what's the alternative? So for today's episode, I decided to catch up with one of my old friends, Shane Barriscale. During the lockdown, he set up SMB Multimedia, and he specialises in making virtual choir videos. I hope you enjoy. Shane, thanks so much for joining me. How are you in this strangest of strangest time?
I'm good, David. Thanks very much for having me. Yeah, it is very strange. I mean, this is the third time in a year we've been in this position, and I think it feels slightly more dramatic this time, for obvious reasons with the numbers being reported. But I think people like yourself and myself are persevering, and the show goes on. We've all moved back online with our teaching and all of that.
You are a professional singer as well, and you sing in professional choirs. So how has that been possible in COVID times?
Oh, it's been very difficult, as you might understand. Certain things were allowed throughout the year, in between the various restrictions from the government, but it was always very, very different to what you might expect from a choir. We were 2 meters apart from each other, very rigorous hand hygiene, temperature checks, masks during rehearsals. One particular performance we were allowed to do, we had to mask between every movement when we weren't singing. So I think people still appreciated it, though, all the same. The biggest difference, of course, though, was that there was no live audiences. So even though we were performing in the room ourselves, and we had the various restrictions very carefully followed, it was for live stream. It was for release on the likes of YouTube and Facebook. So, I mean, I think it just shows a bit of tenacity from all involved, that they're still trying their hardest to make music and make kind of art for people, even throughout all of this, which is to be commended. But I think everyone, and I hope you'll agree with me here, is just craving a time when we can just get back to something that constitutes a normal performance again.
Yeah, oh God, whenever that'll be. So your professional choirs have struggled on. I suppose one of the things about singing in a professional choir is you don't really need to rehearse much. You don't do many rehearsals, you just get together and perform. With the more social, dare I say, amateur choir, rehearsing is probably the big part of it, because that's the social element, and that's what people really enjoy. Presumably that type of choir is completely gone now.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of them had to go completely on hiatus. Now, a few of them would have taken to an online-based rehearsal, which is, again, it's somewhat of a stopgap. You don't get exactly the same effect because, based on the restrictions of the software, you can't really sing live over something like Zoom or something like Google Meet or Teams or anything like that, because of reasons of internet delay. What you can do, however, though, is still have your corner of the week where you sit down for an hour. And this is why I think it's quite important for amateur choirs to consider this, if it's at all possible. Even that option of having that hour to sit down and sing, even if all you hear in the room is just yourself and the choir director through the Zoom meeting. There's something still very nice about that, and I've got some very good feedback from one of my choirs in particular who did take to this format, and they say they look forward to that hour every week. So there's something very therapeutic about singing, just the act of singing, physically doing it. I think it's a bit of a release, and then maybe it's something to do with the breath, something to do with the concentration, that kind of thing. I think people still do get a lot out of it.
Sure. So you may not be singing really together with people, but you still get the chance to sing and to see your friends.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, I mean, I'm sure we've all been there where we've had a group call on WhatsApp or a chat on Zoom with coffee, and it is nice to even just have an interaction with people, even if it's just for that one corner of the week.
I've seen a few newsreels and videos being shared of virtual choirs. Basically, lots of people singing as if they're on a big Zoom call and they're all singing together and the sound is coming through. And you have made a few of these videos and you've set up SMB Multimedia. Talk a little bit about how that all came about.
So, as I was saying there, with the limitations in the technology, it's very hard to do these kind of things live unless you're in the room with other people. But this is where the concept of the virtual choir comes into play. Now, anyone who's been keeping an eye on things like this over the last number of years will have probably spotted the likes of Eric Whittaker and some of these big titans in choral music already doing things like this. This was pre-pandemic, so this was a way of getting people from around the world to kind of create a single piece together, which is very ambitious and very exciting. And I think at the time, it was only people of the scope of Eric Whittaker who were kind of interested in this because they had such a draw and their music was so kind of well loved. When a call was put out for expressions of interest, I think his most recent one, Virtual Choir 6, if I'm not mistaken, had something like 8,000 submissions from around the world, which is incredible. Now, when the pandemic came around and then choral singing had to be put on hiatus, this concept kind of came back into people's mind again. They were like, well, that's something I recognized from a couple of years ago. Maybe it's something we can do ourselves. So I have a particular interest in this because before I moved to Dublin and before I started singing as my full-time occupation, I did a course in the University of Limerick called Interactive Media. And a part of that was video editing, parts of that was sound manipulation and sound mixing. And I just thought to myself, well, I will try this very much as a personal project. So back in March, I got a few colleagues of mine from the Palestrina Choir, and yourself, David, included, joined me for that, to do a recording of just a sacred piece that we all knew quite well. And very much a passion project, just to get people involved and also to figure out how the technology worked, because I understood how it should be put together in theory, but I'd never actually tried it before.
So you needed a dry run, effectively.
Effectively, and I said, look, I'll do this. I know the people in that choir were just missing singing anyway, as I was myself. So I said, this is great. I'm sure people will take to it, which they did. So I had 16 members involved in that. And from there, I ironed out a lot of the kinks. I figured out a lot of what needed to be done, and I just got faster with it. And just through a series of very nice, fortuitous events, a few friends and colleagues then started to ask me about it more. They said, we saw that video you made with the Palestrina Choir. Is there any chance, could we book you to do something like that for our choir? And it kind of went from there. So, and this was a mixture. This was some choral societies, some small chamber choirs, workplace choirs, and community choirs, a variety of different groups, and mostly amateur groups, as you said, who do this for fun. And they were just missing having a project, having a goal and a destination for their rehearsals. I mean, you can do all the rehearsals you want on Zoom, but there is something of a lack of what are we rehearsing for? And I think this concept of the virtual choir has started to fill that gap for a lot of people, seeing an end result.
Okay, so you started in March, a bit experimental. I was even involved in that. By December, by Christmas time, you had perfected your craft. So if anyone doesn't have a clue what we're talking about, I'm just going to play a little bit of a clip. Now, this is one of the videos you have made. It is an arrangement of Let It Snow by Kirby performed by the fantastic NUIG Choral Society.
Oh, let it snow, snow, let it snow, snow, let it snow, snow, let it snow. Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. And since we've no place to go, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
Okay, Shane, so we've seen there lots of different singers on the screen at one time singing. Presumably, they're not actually just there all in real time and it's just one take. Presumably, it's a little bit more complicated than that. Would you just talk through the process? What did we see there?
Well, so that, as you said, there was the NUIG Choral Society, directed by a good friend of mine, Stephen Carroll. So you see the end result there, and it looks for all the world like everyone is on screen at the same time. And for all accounts, it might seem like it's live, but there's a bit of wizardry behind the scenes. So everyone in that recording, actually, in the comfort of their own home, recorded their own parts individually. So the first thing they needed was a click track. So in advance of everyone doing their recordings, they all need to be singing at the same speed for the final product. So what you do is either using a piano or just a vocal reference line, you prepare a track in advance, you send it out to the individual singers, you say, sing along with this track using headphones. Now, a common mistake that people sometimes have is they play the track in the room while singing along with it, and then that can't unfortunately be used in the final product. It very much has to be just a vocal line that the person mixing the virtual choir gets.
So just your voice. If there's a backing track there, it's useless.
Exactly. So you hear the backing track through headphones, these wonderful kind of Bluetooth headphones or wired
Showing
headphones
off your fancy earphones there.
So exactly. So you would record your vocal line singing along at the exact same speed as the reference track. That recording there had 25 singers, so I got 25 videos sent to me, the various parts of harmony, and then I put it together. Then I layered the videos, tiled them on the screen. I export the audio from everyone's tracks. I put them into an audio editing software, line them all up, adjust the volume levels because some people have more sensitive microphones than others. Some people sat further back than others. So you just have to balance it a little bit and do a bit of post-production on it. And
okay,
then,
so it is a serious job. So people have recorded themselves. Are they on their, phones, their smartphones, and they send it to you? And you're saying you separate the audio from the video, and then you do lots of production on the audio.
Yes. So there's many ways to skin a cat, as the phrase goes. It's not always mandatory to export the audio. It's just I find it easier to do a kind of a master mix of the audio separately, and when you can see the waveforms, as you do in the different audio apps such as Logic Pro or GarageBand, it's very easy to see, for example, if somebody accidentally held on a note too long or if somebody had a stray S in the wrong place at the end of a word. That's why I find it's easier to pull the audio off separately, work with that by itself first, mix it all together and end up with a single kind of MP3 at the end of it all. That's the mix of the audio.
Yeah, so you said you use, was it a Logic Pro and GarageBand there? And I suppose asking about the technologies, how feasible is it for, let's say, an amateur choir to go and do this themselves, or would they really need to get, the professionals in?
I think people who are enthusiastic about it, you can get most of the way there by yourselves to a degree. You might find that you need to outsource something, though, at a certain point. And it depends very much on what you're going for. If you're looking for something very slick and very well put together, you might say, well, look, okay, I'll get somebody who's experienced at this to do it. But if you're an enthusiastic amateur, I would say that nothing is outside the scope of possibility in this day and age. There's gallons of tutorials on YouTube. For example, anyone who's lucky enough to have a MacBook, for example, it comes with this fantastic built-in software called GarageBand, which is basically free. There's no subscription to that. And you can do quite a lot with that. There's also services such as Audacity, which is a free audio editing software. And then for anyone that wants to go a little bit more into the premium softwares, things like Logic Pro, Pro Tools, different type of things. There's lots of different things you can do. Now, whether you have the time or the patience to do that is a different story. This is where people have come to me because this whole process can sometimes take 15 to 20 hours of editing. Right. Even just for a 3-minute video. So,
including all the preparation, the what do you say, the mix tape or the click you send click people, track, yeah. Click track, that's the one, and all then the editing afterwards and putting the video back together with the sound. How long does it take?
You would genuinely see 15, 20 hours go by in in an instant. You think, gosh, that sounds like a lot of time. It's just because of the parts involved. Even just the admin of it, just receiving 25 videos and cataloging them and trimming them and clipping them and making sure they're all lined up with each other. As I was saying earlier, I like to work with the audio separately. So you're talking about then two strands of editing. You're mixing the audio on one side of the project, and then you're tiling and editing the videos on a different side of the process. So it can take a little bit of time. This is why it is quite important to get those preparatory steps, I think, very well set up. So having a good reference track, a good backing track, cuts out a lot of post-production. You don't have to edit people quite as much if the backing track is very clear, for example. So
sure, so get the first take right, in other words, rather than trying to go back, is what you'd advise.
Exactly. So if you're somebody who's thinking, I'd like to try that myself, I think I can figure out how to do it by myself without sending it off to somebody to edit. I would say the most important thing for me is making sure that the track you send the members of your choral group is exceptionally clear. And the thing is, because it doesn't feature in the final video recording, you can be very, very descriptive on it. For example, if you're playing it on the piano, if you're a choral director who's playing the backing track on the piano, I would actually, as well as singing, I would always be speaking. I'd be like playing the intro and saying, okay, and the entry is in 3, 2, and here we go. And then you kind of give verbal cues like that along the way, and you could say, hold and off, and you can say all these things in the reference track and the clip track or the backing track, whichever you're using. And I think the more prescriptive you are, the better, because then people will be singing along at home and they'll almost feel as if it's a rehearsal, like they're singing with you in the room, describing how it works.
Sure. Presumably you need a nice soft tone for that, so it's not too loud and comes through on the recording.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing. People do sometimes have slight mishaps with their recordings where they have headphones in, but there's this thing called like audio bleed or audio leaking, where the sounds, even if you're playing it in your own headphones, it's just kind of coming out the side of the headphones enough that your microphone or your phone is picking it up. So you do have to make sure either you have the headphones really pressed in, or you have just been conscious to have the volume in your own headphones just loud enough that you can hear it, and that it isn't leaking into the room as well.
Okay. Well, I imagine most people who are interested in doing this with their local choir are suddenly thinking, right, we'll get a professional in. Tell us a little bit about SMB Multimedia.
So this was an organization. I've been doing a number of different projects over the last number of years as a bit of a side project to my professional singing. This involves some graphic design, a little bit of video editing for some of the groups I was working with, a tiny bit of sound mixing over the years, very much on the side of my main gig. So SMB Multimedia was my way of giving it a name, an umbrella that would tie all of these different facets together: graphics, sound, video. And as you said in your intro, at the moment that has lent into this kind of specialist area of virtual choir editing. I think just because there's an appetite for it right now. So that's it. So SMB is my initials. My full name is Shane Matthew Barriscale. So that's why I came up with SMB. And then multimedia, I think, covers all the different facets of the visual and the audio arts.
And of course it's pretty clever, because needless to say, as musicians, we're down lots and lots of work from live performing. So it's you could be giving a talk on how to, entrepreneurship during the lockdown, how you can think of a business that's actually could thrive during this time.
Well, I mean, just from everything I've read over the years, branding is quite important. Even singers know this. Because you're basically a self-employed person, and you have to advertise yourself. So absolutely. And just having a name for something, having a logo, having just a bit of brand recognition.
Especially now, everyone is online and everyone is trying to get that little bit of exposure. I think we have to try that a little bit harder to get ourselves out there.
Absolutely. Oh, completely. And the Irish art scene is very, very it's amazing. There's just this huge pool of talented people out there. But we're a small island, and there isn't always enough work in one strand of that industry. So I have absolute huge props to people who are able to make it exclusively as a singer. It's an incredibly tough job. So if you're having any difficulty with that, my advice to you would be say, well, look, is there tangential areas of my industry that I can not replace, the art with, that you could actually say, well, I'm going to buffer it, I'm going to buttress it, I'm going to do my main interest, but also could I do this that kind of complements it and do that kind of adds to it. And for me, the virtual choirs was such a logical step into that, because I've worked with so many choirs over the years, and I've built up a huge network of friends and colleagues over the years, and I'm so grateful to them now. They're coming to me asking me to help with virtual choirs, and I'm very, very thankful to them. So if any of them are watching right now, thank you very much for the work.
This is the part of my videos where I'd say please like and subscribe David Scott Singer. I suppose as you're here, Shane, I should say please follow SMB Multimedia. How can we do that?
So I'm on Facebook and YouTube right now. So the full title will be SMB Multimedia Ireland. I put Ireland on it just to give myself a bit of a geolocation. So if you search that on YouTube or Facebook, give me a like and a subscribe, and you can keep up to date with the work I'm pursuing at the moment. Some examples of my virtual choirs are up there as well. And if anyone is interested in getting in touch, I also have an email, smbmultimediaireland@gmail.com. Only too happy to chat to people about this, even if people are looking for advice about how to get started and just the different resources that they might need. Drop me a line. I mean, I'm only too happy to have people get going as well on their own journey with virtual choirs.
We'll put those links in the description to this video. Shane Matthew Barriscale, thank you so much for talking to me today about the virtual choirs.
Thank you for having me, David.